Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're fixing what we broke the last time in Life is Strange Episode 4. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. At the end of the last episode, we found out that going back in time and righting the perceived wrong of Chloe's dad dying had some unintended consequences. The biggest of these appears to be that Chloe herself suffered some kind of accident instead. We'll find out through conversation that she wound up getting a car from her parents for her birthday, and an SUV ran her off the road, crashing her car into a ditch and snapping her neck. She's been paralyzed from the neck down ever since. But things only get worse from there. Chloe's parents have taken on massive amounts of debt to ensure that she can be taken care of, and they're unable to focus on anything outside of her care. This has brought an immense amount of guilt onto her shoulders, and she really wants Max to focus on anything other than her physical state or the accident. She mentions how she gets enough of people feeling sorry for her, and she just wants to have one semi-normal day with Max. Back at the house, we can see the special room they put together for her, with a medical bed and equipment to help move her around and take care of her. It's a lot different from the room upstairs that we spent time in earlier. During the conversation about the medical bills, we can find our first real moment that lines up with the real world, something that gets a lot of talk in the United States in particular. Chloe mentions that her medical bills are costing her parents somewhere in the ballpark of $1 million a year. A truth that many people in the real world live through every day. It's something that I could go on and on about, and a topic that's been covered by people way more qualified than I am to discuss the state of the medical system we live with. From an ethical and moral standpoint, I'll just say one thing before moving on. No one should ever be crushed under medical debt, and there is absolutely no reason that we should have to settle for a system where people would need to choose between medical care and keeping a roof over their head or food on the table. The fact that anyone in the world that we live in would ever be turned down for care or saddled with so much debt they'll never be able to pay it off because of an injury or illness is pathetic, and we need to do better. There are thousands of families like Chloe's in our world, and we need to step up and do the right thing by them because that could easily be any of us. Diseases like cancer don't discriminate, and accidents can happen out of the blue to anyone at any time. With that out of the way, we can focus on what might be one of the most difficult and controversial decisions in this episode, and possibly in the series in general. See, Chloe isn't getting any better, and she isn't even staying stable. Her respiratory system is shutting down, and all the machines and equipment keeping her alive and driving her parents further into debt are more or less just prolonging what is going to be an incredibly short and miserable life for her. After a movie night and a short conversation the next morning, Chloe asks Max to get her pain medicine out of the cabinet upstairs. On the way to do that, we can have conversations with both Joyce and William and explore some of the notes and letters around the house detailing the family's dire financial situation and Chloe's worsening condition. One other thing of note that we can find, though, pertains directly to the choice that we made to take the supposed handicapped fund from the principal's office in the last episode. There is a letter among Chloe's school stuff from Principal Wells apologizing for the school not having the proper facilities, mainly in the form of wheelchair ramps. In the letter, he blames federal cuts in education and the fact that the school was built prior to 1977 for the lack of proper renovations, and says that they'll just have to keep working on private funding to maybe someday be able to facilitate students like Chloe. For starters, if Chloe's last name was Prescott, I'm sure the school would be able to find the funds with no issue. But worse yet is the fact that they obviously had some decent donations being made to the Handicapped Fund and still seem to be short for making the environment more inclusive. But that's not all, because while he blames federal funding, Blackwell is a private school, meaning that most of their funding would come from donors and private tuition anyway, not federal funds. While cuts to federal funding could impact their ability to provide some amenities and services, the fact that basic things like wheelchair ramps haven't been built makes it seem like they aren't exactly using the stacks of cash lying around for their supposed purpose. Obviously, a lot of this is circumstantial, but we've seen the principal's bias in favor of students like Nathan, and it isn't a big leap to imagine that he's embezzling or misusing funds in some way. But all of that pales next to the massive choice that we're presented with as Chloe and Max are reminiscing over some old photos. Chloe is aware of her condition and how much worse it's been getting, and she doesn't like the idea of leaving her parents more in debt just to prolong her life for maybe a few more months, where she'll just be mostly bedridden and wasting away more and more. She wants to end things in a more dignified way, if such a thing is possible. And she wants to go out on her own terms. She's enjoyed the day that she got to spend with Max, and she wants that day to be her final memory. She wants Max to turn up the morphine drip and let her fade off into a forever sleep. So, this gets really into some deep stuff, and it's worth spending a little time on from multiple angles. What Chloe is asking for is really something known as death with dignity. As simply and straightforward as I can make it, death with dignity allows people who are terminally ill to end their own lives in a humane way on their own terms. It isn't something that is legal in many places, but in Chloe's case, Oregon actually has a law on the books called the Death with Dignity Act that was passed in 1997 and allows for her to make this choice. It would require a medical sign-off and a specific medication to be used, but it is something that she could and should be allowed to consider. I say should because each and every one of us should have the option to avoid the pain and suffering that comes with some of the worst kind of illnesses and injuries. If someone knows that they only have a few months to live, and that those few months will be filled with horrible pain or the inability to do things for themselves or be happy, they should be allowed to make a choice to end their lives on their own terms. Like the discussion about medical bills and the healthcare system from earlier, this just seems like common sense. But it gets a little complicated thanks to the living. Human beings are a social species, and we have a very difficult time dealing with the loss of those that we love and care for as a general rule. Many of us, if given the option, would choose to keep a loved one around on life support if there was even a small chance that they would recover, rather than letting them go. And someone on life support isn't even responsive normally. If someone who is wide awake and still able to have conversations says that they want their life to end because they are in pain and have no real chance to ever recover, most people would beg them to reconsider rather than honor that wish. This is, at its core, a very selfish desire, but also a very natural one. We value life in its purest form, and we don't want to see it end. We also tend to grab onto any sliver of hope and hang on for dear life, making it even harder emotionally when that hope slips away and the person we love passes. That's a big part of why death with dignity is a controversial topic. We tend to see someone wanting to end their life as giving up hope, even when that hope is more false than real. We might even tell ourselves that we would never consider such a thing, that the suffering would be worth it just to see one additional sunrise or spend one more moment with our loved ones. But the reality is that we can't know what we would do or what we would want until we find ourselves in that situation. When the pain is unbearable, when the medicine is making life worse, when we have to rely on others to clean us up and feed us through a tube. This is personal to me because my great-uncle was one of those people who would have benefited from a death with dignity law. He spent his life as a firefighter. He was a big, strong man who it seemed would live forever. The last year of his life saw him going through more pain and suffering than anyone should have to endure. Nurses were in and out at all hours, helping to keep him comfortable as he just waited for the end and lost strength with each passing day. When my aunt asked him what she could do for him, he begged her to hand him one of his guns so he wouldn't need to go on suffering. She couldn't bring herself to do it, and even if she had, she would likely have wound up in jail for helping him. He eventually passed away after a little over a year of being stuck in bed. No one should have to suffer that way if they would rather end it. But no loved one should have to assist in the act either, though that is what Chloe asks of Max. This request is unthinkable, and if it were a real situation, I wouldn't fault Max for being unable to go through with helping Chloe. The emotional toll doing something like that would bring would be a heavy burden, not to mention the possible legal ramifications. Max would most certainly wind up going to jail for the act, especially as the only proof that she would have that Chloe wanted her to do it would be her word. Joyce and William wouldn't accept that Chloe wanted to die, and they would likely want to pursue charges against Max even if the state didn't. But the game doesn't give us the option to help Chloe pursue the legal death with dignity route, where we could potentially spend time helping her convince her parents that it was for the best and moving forward with medical assistance. Instead, we have to decide to either turn up the morphine or refuse to honor Chloe's wishes. Given the circumstances, I chose to help her. One thing I especially didn't like here, though, is that if you choose "I don't know" to give yourself more time to think it through, she compares what Chloe is asking to what Kate did, and there is no comparison to be made there. Kate's decision to jump off the roof was tied directly to her mental health and some emotional and physical trauma she had gone through. If she had decided not to jump, she could seek help and eventually work through things and live a full, healthy life. Chloe is dying, with her body slowly shutting down, and she has no real chance of ever getting any better. She'll spend whatever time she has left waiting on her body to finally give out. She'll be alive, but she won't be living. It's another one of those moments where the writers just completely failed to convey any sense that they thought any of this through. And I almost feel like they were more focused on providing an emotional gut punch than actually exploring a complex and sensitive topic. But, like many of the other decisions the game offers, this one falls flat because within moments we're using the photo that got us into this mess to go back and let William walk out the door with his car keys, setting the timeline back to where we were and leaving us with nothing but emotional scars. Back in Chloe's room, in what is the normal timeline, we find ourselves working through the clues that we've gathered to this point and finding some new information in David's office. Most of that info will have to wait, though, as we need all the possible evidence of what happened to Rachel Amber before we can start really digging in. That's right, I know it is probably easy to forget, but we're still working on figuring out what happened to Chloe's ex-girlfriend? Best friend? The girl that Chloe replaced Max with. I'm going to breeze through a lot of things here because while they are kind of important in the course of the story, there isn't really a lot to talk about. Chloe and Max go back to Blackwell and break into Nathan's dorm room, where we learn a little bit more about the relationship between him and his parents, find some photos of Chloe that he definitely shouldn't have, and discover his secret drug dealer phone taped to the back of the couch. On the way out, we actually run into Nathan, who isn't particularly happy to see Max and Chloe in his building. This might be an issue, except that Warren steps in to save the day once more, beating the crap out of Nathan this time. We can stop him, or even watch it and then rewind and stop him, but honestly, seeing Nathan get a little taste of his own medicine is kind of cathartic. From there, we take a trip to the beach to visit Frank, because we need a code to help decipher the book that we lifted from him in the last episode. And the visit didn't go very smooth for me. I wound up having to rewind a couple of times because Chloe got mouthy with him, his dog got violent, guns were pulled, and I just kept picking the wrong dialogue options. I finally ended up with a compromise where Chloe shot him in the leg and he gave us the code. I was honestly just too annoyed with the conversation at that point to try for anything better, and I wanted to carry on with the story. Back in Chloe's room, we piece together the clues that we've managed to gather and come up with a likely location that Rachel would have been taken on the night that she disappeared. This whole sequence was both infuriating and satisfying, as I took way too long to figure out the clues, though that's more on me than on the game. In the end, the clues point to Rachel being taken to some creepy barn in the middle of nowhere. And after a short drive, we find ourselves standing in what I can only imagine is ground zero for dozens of murders. Breaking in was easy. Advancing the story wasn't. Long story short, there is a puzzle to solve here, as there appears to be some kind of door hidden under the hay scattered on the floor of the barn. The door is locked and can't be opened by simply pulling on it. Instead, needing us to figure out how to connect a rope between the door and a heavy piece of machinery that's up in the rafters, using the machine to provide the leverage that we need to open the door by pushing it off and letting gravity do the work. That wasn't too difficult overall, except for the bug that almost prevented me from being able to even finish the playthrough. See, when you push the machine off, you're supposed to then climb back down out of the rafters to trigger the next cutscene and advance the plot. But in my case, I was teleported down to the ground level instead, locking me out of the trigger and making it impossible to advance. I had to reload and do the whole thing over several times before I finally got it to work as intended. For those who might find themselves in the same situation, it helps to have Chloe hook the rope up to the door when you're up on top already. I also pushed the machine off first, then rewound and had Chloe attach the rope, and then pushed the machine off again, which seemed to break me out of the loop. With that out of the way, we find ourselves facing a keypad and a large door. There's no indication whatsoever of what the code for the door is, but in a moment of what I can only assume was once-in-a-lifetime brilliance, I somehow remembered a code written in red on top of one of the papers that I'd seen when inspecting the clues in Chloe's room. Blindly typing in a code that I was sure would be wrong, I was surprised to see the light turn green and the door open up. I'd love to just take that win and call it a day, but this secret room winds up blowing the whole mystery wide open. It turns out this is a secret lair called the Dark Room, where someone, likely Nathan Prescott and maybe an accomplice, has been taking girls for extremely creepy photo shoots. There are pictures of Kate and dozens of folders containing photos of other young women, including Rachel Amber. The photos of Rachel seem to point to a location Chloe recognizes as the junkyard the girls used to hang out in, and after rushing to the scene, we discover a shallow grave that contains human remains. It would seem we've discovered what happened to at least one of the victims of Nathan. But things aren't that simple, because there is a Vortex Club party getting ready to kick off, and it's likely that Nathan is planning to kill again, taking someone from the party back to the darkroom at the first opportunity. Making our way there, we stop for a selfie with Warren that will come in handy at a later time, before heading inside to look for Nathan and Victoria, who it seems may be destined for a date with the darkroom. I took the time to warn her of the danger, for whatever good it might do, and stuck around just long enough to hear Victoria named as the winner of the photo contest that I'd honestly forgotten was even a thing. Nathan was nowhere to be found within the walls of the pool house party, but it isn't long before we have a clue as to where he's gone, as he texts Chloe to let her know that he's waiting for us right back at the junkyard. Like a couple of amateurs, Chloe and Max let their guard down and wind up being ambushed, with Max being drugged before watching Chloe get shot. Max is expecting to see Nathan staring down at her as she lays in the dirt and tries to rewind, but instead, we're greeted by the face of Mr. Jefferson, and the episode ends just as things are heating up. There's one episode left, and some interesting discussion to be had surrounding time travel and personal responsibility, but that will have to wait until next week. The culmination of that episode is the final, biggest, and probably most controversial choice in the game, and you're not going to want to miss out on that. To make sure you catch it when it releases, you're going to want to like this video and subscribe to Lost in Games on YouTube. I also couldn't make these kind of videos without the support of some amazing channel members and patrons. And if you're interested in joining the list of names that you see on the screen, while helping me to keep diving into games like Life is Strange, you can sign up for a channel membership here on YouTube or as a patron over on Patreon. For just a couple of bucks a month, you can help me with things like getting new games to cover and acquiring more storage space for those games and the footage that goes with them. That's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.